always really struggled with the concept of work-life balance, not just because it's hard to find balance in anything, but just when you think about it generally, like if you've got balance, you've got scales. And if it tips one way or the other, then it so easily puts one at odds with the other. So when you think about work and life, it's like, well, if it's even, then you're winning. But how often is that actually your reality? So it's either your work is doing really well, but then your life is not, or the flip side, then you feel like if you feel really good in your personal life, that your work is suffering. And so that has always been something I've struggled with a lot. And Jeff Bezos recently talked about it more as a circle. And that was something that really resonated with me, with this idea that sort of it's more fluid and it can flow between the two. And I really like the concept of that, because I really feel like at the end of the day, in the workplace and in the workforce, we're adults. And we have to have trust in ourselves and in each other to be able to do what we need to do to be successful, both professionally and personally. And so being able to lean into what we're doing professionally to get our tasks done, to contribute in the best way we can. And sometimes being able to contribute at work means you need to be able to be mindful and present at home, and to feel like you have that part of your life together, because if you're stressed in one, you're going to be stressed in the other, and then no one benefits from that. And so a lot of it to me is just having that honest conversation with myself and some grace for when I'm able to really show up at my best in either of those places, as well as when I'm not, to kind of forgive myself for that, and to talk with my supervisors and my team to be really candid and vulnerable about what's going on, because I find that then you get the support that you need, as well as then with my husband and my family too. So that way I am feeling fulfilled and I am feeling successful, because I feel like that's when things become a little toxic, is if you feel like you're not, and then that just sort of becomes this cycle.
So I would say for myself, starting in my career path, the best recommendation for a healthy work-life balance for me, being a single mom, being a full-time student, being a full-time employee, is I have a very great support system. If it wasn't for my coworkers and my family, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. So it takes a village to raise a child and, get to where I want to be. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here.
So having been around, I've raised 3 children while working at Bryan and Stratton. And, back then, 35 years ago, we didn't have all the technology that we have nowadays. And working women in the environment with children, you really just needed to do your job. Mm-hmm. And when your child was sick before 8 a.m. happened, you needed to be able to figure that out and, drop that child somewhere and get to work still by 8 a.m. That was all the expectation back then. And, nowadays, especially since COVID, we have all this technology that all the, the organizations have employed. So it's become, while there are still positions that, you can't have a crying child in the background because you're on a call like this, there is a little bit more flexibility where, maybe I can come in 3 hours later, or, when my husband gets home, I'll be able to shift my schedule. There's just a lot more flexibility nowadays related to work-life balance. I know that that's an important conversation that we have when we are looking for new associates within the college. And, it's just, even though it's come a long way, I still think it's going to evolve even further, as the years, the technology gets more honed in related to security. Obviously, security is a huge issue, with working remote and dealing with all of that. So I know that in my past 30 years, that whole concept has drastically changed. You don't have to be afraid to say that you're a mom anymore. when you go and talk to an employer, because they understand children get sick. Things are going to come up. You need to go to kindergarten graduation, all of that type of stuff. So it does, it definitely is evolving, and it's come so far in the last 30 years. And I think it's just going to keep changing exponentially as we go forward.
I think, Doreen, to your point, one thing as you were speaking, the phrase, you can have it all, but you can't have it all right now. And that's a phrase that I often tell myself as somebody who's really eager to advance in her career myself. Particularly, I think that work-life balance doesn't necessarily always mean, you punch in at 8 and you punch out at 5. It looks different. It's an ebb and flow. Some days you may work till 7 or 8 and you come in a little bit later, depending on, what your particular schedule is or the organization that you're working for. But I think, as organizations continue to make strides in advocating for women, I also think that we need to advocate for ourselves and putting the right boundaries in, whether that's, for me personally, it's blocking time off on my calendar when I know I need to go pick my son up from school or to eat, or to just incorporate some white space into my day so that I can catch up on emails, or if I have a deliverable, just, focusing solely on that. So we have to make sure that we're doing that for ourselves as well.
I think that's so important, Megan. The other piece of it too, I think, is when we think about work life, like it's life. So even people who may not have families or don't have families yet, it's also for everybody to think about what's important to you. And so if it is that someone wants to lean into what's happening with their family, great. But if it's also, you don't have a family necessarily, but you are really passionate about a sport, or you're passionate about some other activity, being able to take that time for self-care or self-fulfillment outside of what you're doing at work is equally important. And being able to advocate for that time, and choosing organizations that also value that as well, and recognize that you have interests outside of whatever work you do for that organization, and being understanding and encouraging of you pursuing those passions and finding that balance, because burnout does not help anybody. And it just leads to people either not doing as good of work as they otherwise might, or leaving and trying to find an organization that allows them to have more of what they need in both environments.
Yeah, I also think that women too often, myself included, is certainly guilty of this, find ourselves comparing ourselves to one another. And comparison is the thief of joy. And I, in my research, my doctoral research, that's what I found. Just women, often having a propensity to pit themselves against one another and trying to determine, well, this person, has a role that, I really want, or they're 5 years ahead of where I really want to be. And instead of, asking the question, what experiences do I need to get in order to get there, and what can I learn from you?